Reporting live from the Hodlonaut Craig Wright trial here in Oslo.
Craig Stephen Wright, born son of son, is an Australian computer scientist and businessman. He is publicly claimed to be the main part of the team that created Bitcoin and the entity behind the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto. These claims are regarded as false by most of the media and the cryptocurrency community.
The purpose of this trial is to assess to the degree that Hodlonaut's tweets were damaging, not to ultimately rule whether or not Craig Wright is Satoshi, but to do that fairly requires the judge to come to an understanding of whether or not Craig Wright is Satoshi.
This Australian says he and his dead friend invented Bitcoin.
There was about an hour of discussion about trusts and keys. And to be honest, there was a mixture of clear and confusing information. While understanding that this is a very complex subject, it's hard to say if the lawyer was maybe a little confused or just in the explanation, it was a little hard to follow. But also, I was getting everything translated from Norwegian, so it's hard to know what was lost in translation as well. There was also a deep discussion about the Panama Trust and the timeline, and there was a very exhaustive delineation using previous rulings, both the McCormack ruling, the Florida ruling. There were numerous previous cases in Australia as well that were all factored into and kind of just recapped and reported on by one of Hodlonaut's lawyers. And then the day actually ended with one of Hodlonaut's lawyers citing over 7,000 tweets that cite fraud or fake Toshi, and she read a large smattering of them, many of them very explicit, and also documented a good deal of the replies with Craig Wright's since deleted Twitter, but within threads having some of the replies preserved.
Thou who tells people to hodl is a scammer pushing a Ponzi. Basically, pump, leave like light Charlie. The sale is to make a few as the bag holders collapse. Bad lop. Occam's razor, the real Satoshi, should be the most effortless in proving whatever he wants to prove, instead of CSW's countless desperate attempts. Och så svarade då, right? Foo, the burn, lol, no, proof is as I pattern, as I make you all poor losers begging, that is the proof.
The lawyers were more showing all of the times that there had been promises of signing or moving Bitcoin to a specific address, to a specific person, and it not being done and delivered. I do think there was a good overview of the history of Bitcoin, talking about the white paper and the dates even included in the white paper. It was a long day, and I know tomorrow there will be more voices. I'm not sure if all of Craig's 9 lawyers will be presenting, but I'm sure it will be some assortment. Both of Hodlonaut's lawyers spoke at certain times today, but we have a lot to cover. I know that this is only day 1. There will be a much deeper dive, and there will be witnesses. The judge did mention today that she has requested the large number of witnesses to be whittled down. I believe it's currently standing at 5, and she's asking for it to be 3. But we will continue to be filming this entire trial and also reporting live from Oslo.
Excellent. Thank you guys both so much for putting that all together and, being in that room. My first question is just what is the temperature in there? And forgive the ignorance of it, I'm assuming there are opening statements, much like in the American court of law. Like, what were the opening remarks from both sides, from both parties here?
So today was only the opening remarks from Hodlonaut's lawyers. And one of his lawyers spoke. So it was divided into 2 parts. There was a lunch break, and then there was a break in between each of those sections. It started at 9 a.m. and ended actually close to 5 p.m. So it was a very long day of just a pretty much one lawyer speaking, and there were technical issues. So the judge did have, and I heard referenced up to like 700. I heard like an 11 page number. There's a huge amount of documentation that the lawyers had given to the judge, so she's following along, but there were no visuals for everyone else that's in the court. So you're just hearing everything be read, and they would read anything that was in English, they would read in English, but everything else was being translated. And we did have, kind of like the UN has, we had a device that they had translators in the room, but they were constantly telling the lawyer to slow down so that they could translate everything in time. But tomorrow is going to be Craig Wright's opening remarks or statement or case, really. And so what we went through today was really the entire timeline. It was an introduction to Bitcoin, on a high level. And the lawyer even said at one point, I'm not trying to explain Bitcoin right now, but it is essential to understand the import of this case and to understand the assertion of being Satoshi Nakamoto. It does depend on a fundamental understanding of Bitcoin and of the history of it, and with white paper. And it is a very nuanced case. I think the judge is trying really hard to understand all of the complexities of it. But it'll be interesting to see tomorrow if it's the same kind of logical timeline, or if it's going to take a different approach. There were a total of 9 lawyers accompanying Craig today, and 5 of them were in the second row behind him, and they were all wearing translator headsets. So my presumption is that they are his UK legal counsel. I didn't confirm, but the up front, the 2 on either side of him, none of them were wearing a translator, and I assume that they are his Norwegian counsel that will be doing the most of the proceedings. I do know that the cross-examination, which is going to be on Wednesday for Craig, is mostly going to all take place in English. But other than that, the majority of this trial will take place in Norwegian. So very thankful for some boots on the ground translator support that we have, a fellow Bitcoiner. And then also the court does supply that, initial translation, but it's still, it's a tough case to follow, especially with a language barrier. And you asked about the temperature of the room, Q, and it is heavy. It is pretty intense, and there's civility. I definitely, was introduced to a couple people, shook their hands. I'm like, wow, I don't, this is awkward in some way, but there is this tension that I think, it's probably roughly 5 meters, 15 feet between Craig Wright and Hodlonaut all day in court, directly opposing each other. And one note, as you notice in the clip, we're continuing to refer to Hodlonaut by his NIM, and blurring out. We, as Bitcoin Magazine is the owner of the press pool, we are the ones that are giving footage to other media organizations, and they can choose if they want to blur his face out or not. So that's kind of our decision to continue to respect his privacy, but I'm sure there will also be other media coverage with his face.
And in this initial conversation, then from Hodlonaut's team to the judge, what does it seem like the judge is following along well? I know that understanding Bitcoin takes a lot of people a lot of time, but to just have it thrown at you in one day of a court trial, and then with the expectation that, all right, now you understand Bitcoin, now let's dive into the nuances of this legal case. What is the judge's response? Are they asking engaging questions? Does it feel as though all of the facts about Bitcoin are being fairly addressed by Hodlonaut?
Yeah, it is a very intense thing to explain in Crash Course. I would say that there's no way that this judge didn't have some cursory exposure and understanding before this. And I would say it seems as if she's tracking. It seems as if, she's like, well, that doesn't quite make sense, or I need maybe a little bit more clarity on that. I would say there were a couple times where from where I was sitting, I felt like the translation, either how it came to me or what was said, was kind of a confusing way to explain things. But there are so many. I mean, we talked about mining at a high level. We talked about trusts. We talked about keys and signing. Like, there's a lot of things that I would say even some Bitcoiners aren't super expert in now, even if they know how to, buy Bitcoin and transfer Bitcoin, even to cold storage, I think there's a lot of deep knowledge and nuance. There definitely seems to be some there's a lot of intention behind it, but I do think having a non-Bitcoiner explain to another non-Bitcoiner, there's some merit in that, but it also made me think, wow, we need some Bitcoiner lawyers. And I don't actually want that to be the case. I don't want us to have that need, but to be able to understand, even in the legal way, how to explain it in that methodical way as well, I think would be super advantageous. But I think she's mostly tracking, and I think I definitely, it was hard. And actually the first half of the day I was silent on Twitter and was just, taking notes and kind of synthesizing everything that was happening. And then I saw some of the tweets from other people that were sitting in the courtroom, and I was just watching the perspective and the angle that they were taking. And I'm like, I was in this exact room and I didn't see it that way, but that's how they're seeing it. And so after lunch, I decided to recap basically each topic that we were going through and kind of live tweet out. I've tweeted more today than I've ever tweeted in my whole life. I'm not a big tweeter, but now I am, and I plan to continue, especially because there are so many people that are in the room that have a different vantage point, and I think it's very important that we give the viewer, the reader, the participant that isn't in the room the chance to have a variety of vantage points and not just one that is coming from a very definitive angle.
And I want to really paint this picture and explain certain things, because there's a lot about this case that I've learned that we take for granted in the United States with our legal system. And you painted a picture of Hodlonaut with his 2 lawyers, and then Craig Wright with his legal team of 9. Can we walk through what the precedent in Norway is in a case like this? Who has to pay these fees, and how does that sort of get handled?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wrote a note early that it felt very David and Goliath to have 9 lawyers against 2. And I would say from my, research that I've done up to this point, I did not study law. This is a new deep dive, but UK does not have a very robust, putting it very kindly, freedom of speech protection. So most anything could be interpreted as hate speech. Now, in Norway, there is much better freedom of speech, better meaning more free. In my estimation, that's better. So there is an argument here, and part of why Hodlonaut wanted the case to be in Norway is there's actually a lot more of a precedent in Norway for him to be able to win this case, because there is actual protection and that's where the crux of this whole case is. If Craig Wright is fraudulently asserting that he is Satoshi, then the damages and the serious harm would be very different. So that's why the judge needs to understand Bitcoin, needs to understand Satoshi, needs to understand kind of these fundamentals, because to make the fair assessment of whether what Hodlonaut was saying was serious libel defamation hinges on whether Craig Wright is Satoshi or not. Does that make sense? I went a little deep, and then I'm going to go back to the legal precedent in Norway.
No,
Okay.
That was excellent put. Thank you.
So in Norway, he can have the ability to speak freely. If he wins this case here, that will it will factor in some capacity to the other case that's currently open in the UK. So Hodlonaut preeminently opened this case in Norway as a protective measure to be on his own turf. And originally, there was a lot of back and forth with getting the case here repealed or released. And then the UK case was also released, repealed, and it kind of climbed. The one in Norway went all the way to the Norwegian Supreme Court, and that's why this case began today. It was decided, it had gone all the way up, it had been decided that this case was going to happen. Now, the case in the UK is about one tweet specifically, and this is about a few tweets. And so that's the technicality which has allowed the UK case, even though there is a provision in UK law that if there's a redundant case in another country, that there's precedent for it to be released. However, because one tweet versus many tweets or multiple tweets, there is this differentiation that's happening. However, this ruling on the Norwegian case will probably impact. I mean, I can't say absolutely will, but it's very likely that whatever the ruling is from this will go into play in the UK case. And the next movement on that would be in December, and there will likely be a ruling sometime in October for the Norwegian case.
And to be perfectly clear, this is just a judge making the determination. There is no jury by peers or anything.
Correct. This is a judge-only decision, which in some ways I think is really amazing and maybe for the best. I don't know what a jury would. I don't know. It's a lot to ask people to follow, and I mean, it's hard. Yeah, like you said, it's a crash course into a lot, and I think it looks as though she's really very fair. And I think as a Bitcoiner, there's maybe some consistent distrust of the state and the systems that have put people in power and kept people in power. But I do think I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful after one day. But I will say it was a very massive amount of information to absorb and stay focused on, because it was very intense and very fast and very deep and high level.
I want to also just get a sense, and if we don't know, that's totally fine. But what other types of, or actually, sorry, let me rephrase. With the decision made in the UK case, has any of that information been shared by Hodlonaut's team in their statements, or has that been referenced at all? That being the decision and the way the UK case had been handled.
The upcoming case or the McCormack case?
The McCormack previous case.
Yeah, that was actually cited today. There wasn't a ton of discussion about it, but they went through previous cases both in Australia and in the UK and kind of went through, because there's actually been quite a few cases that have already closed and the rulings are in. And so they went through and read out the previous cases and drew the comparison and the similarity to the McCormack case with this.
Got it. And of course, we await Craig and his team's opening remarks tomorrow. Are there any expectations that you or the team have of what direction they're going to take it, given sort of what they have previously filed against Hodlonaut?
Well, from the rumblings in the courtroom today, I have a feeling that it's going to be a lot more dramatic. I would say not monotone, but the overall speech cadence was very calm and was very, even though, some of the things that were read or said were very strongly worded, strongly, like passionately meant, it was very non-emotional. And I have a very strong feeling based on some of the interactions between different journalists with the lawyers team. Like, that was something interesting too. We kind of just kept to ourselves. We were at the back. A couple people came up and were like, "Are you Bitcoin Magazine?" Because we had publicly won the press pool. I think they could figure it out. But it was very calm. And I don't know that emotionally it's going to be that same, but that's just a prediction based on rumblings within the court. There were quite a few photographers. So during actual session, during court, no one is allowed. I mean, no one even got up and moved around or went to the bathroom. Like, it was very, very serious. However, during breaks and intermissions, the photographers were pretty aggressive. There were a few more press photographers, and it felt a lot of a paparazzi vibe, getting both Hodlonaut and Craig Wright's, place in the stand and taking a lot of photos. I'm like, once you get it, I'm like, whoa, what else are you getting at this point? But I think it's interesting. There were definitely maybe, there were 20-ish people. Every time I say definitely maybe, I always laugh at myself. There was 20-ish people that were watching the case that weren't necessarily a journalist or a reporter or, someone connected to the legal counsel. And there was a changeover. Some people came in for a couple hours. Some people were there the whole day. I talked to one gentleman who's writing a book, and it's open to the public, so anyone that's here is is welcome to come to this really, really intense, very long, laborious. But it was cool to even that they had that amount of time to really go through and lay out the full case. And I mean, it's pretty weird and wild to be in the room with, it's a tense room to be in. I'll say that.
I do not envy you. It does not sound like necessarily the most fun work trip to get sent on or assignment to be on. But thank you for being the trooper and the feet on the ground for this, Mills. I know that you and the team are going to be covering this all throughout the rest of the week, and will be checking in with us every single morning to kick off Bitcoin Magazine Live through next Tuesday, which is the final day of the trial.
Wednesday.
Next
Tuesdays
Wednesday.
off. Yes.
Okay.
Some of Craig just switched lawyers, and some of his lawyers were not available on that Tuesday. So we have a down day on Tuesday, and we will be back for the last day on
You'd
Wednesday.
think with 9 lawyers on your team, you could take a 1 or 2 off and, still have a lot more lawyers than the person that you're suing. But what do I know? I'm just a lowly pleb who lives in his mother's basement.
Yeah. Well, and we'll have a few different other plebs joining us for our recap and everything the next few days as well. You won't have to just hear, but this was the crash course into what it's going to be like. We didn't really know until we got there what exactly the dynamic would be and how crowded it would be. And I think, there's a stream that the court was running that other media agencies could tune into. But as far as I know, I know they lost audio for a while, and I'm pretty sure that their audio is only in Norwegian. So
So for the English language coverage, tune into Bitcoin Magazine Live. Mills, was there anything else that surprised you out of the courtroom today, or caught you looking?
Honestly, Craig Wright's bodyguard was not, I've seen a lot of bodyguards in my day, and I that's definitely what he was and acted as, but he looked like a retired British footballer in my estimation. So and it was also, I was kind of in between his viewpoint of Craig, and so I just felt like his eyes were always on me, and he was, in like a very dapper plaid suit. It wasn't what I was expecting. His bodyguard was not Calvin, and I did not see Calvin today. I know they've been asked by the judge to reduce their witnesses from 5 to 3. And I'm not sure.
Who presented these witnesses? Was it Craig's team, or were these Hodlonaut's witnesses?
Each team gets witnesses, and I think Hodlonaut has 3, and I think Craig has 5 currently. The only one I know for sure we're not allowed to film is the autist expert. So that is a specific request I am serious. There's 3 things we're not allowed to film. And well, we can't film anyone's name or address or occupation. We don't dox people. We can't film the screens, but there was nothing on the screens today, so that's a moot point. And then we can't film the autist expert.
I want to clarify my next statement by saying we are providing unbiased journalism while we cover this case. Who is asking who to sit and be examined by the autism expert? And part 2 of the question, can I hire this autism expert to sit down and check P out?
Wow. I am going to give you some unbiased factual evidence, which is it is a witness from Craig's team, and it is also a Craig request to not have this expert filmed. So there are only guesses as to why, but from information that I've heard, it might be that he doesn't know which way the expert would sway. So it's maybe a protective mechanism. That's it. I mean, I'll keep you posted on that one.
Interesting. Very interesting. And this case will, I'm sure, catch the eyes and attention of people all over the world. Mills, Pleb Music, thank you so much for your reporting and boots on the ground. Mills, can you just give a quick little handoff of which accounts should people be following for live tweet updates? And then we're going to cut to a commercial shortly after that and be joined by Greg Foss.
Defending BTC is good for overall campaign and case updates. And then I personally was live tweeting specific Mills. It really is the most I've ever tweeted today. So I'm going to keep it up for at least 6 days, but I'm just not promising a career in tweeting.
To be honest, when Mills does tweet, it slaps so hard. So be sure you give specific Mills a follow, because her nightmare is having too many followers. Mills,
It is. Don't follow me.
Mills, thank you so much. Continue to do the excellent reporting you're doing. We will stay up to date and look forward to tomorrow's updates as well.